Now let's further enrich our perspectives and explore some of the issues covered on the program today and beyond with our guest contributor who brings his depth and breadth of analysis to various subjects. And today we have the current affairs analyst and dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies at Baze University in Abuja, Professor Abiodun Adeniyi. Great to see you, Prof.
Thank you, Charles. Good to see you too.
I wonder what your assessment is of what Senator Adamu Aliero had to say about the incredibly emotive and divisive issue of the herder-farmer conflict and attempts to introduce a new law against open grazing at the National Assembly.
Well, I think the exchanges are quite interesting. It's just a reflection of the fact that we're not the same thing. We're not the same in this country. We're different, you know. But the beauty of being different is how we manage the differences. You know, from the exchanges so far, I do not see any chance that we're not going to resolve it. That is something I do not see. I'm not seeing it as something that is irresolvable. I see windows for the resolution of areas of disagreement. Because from what he has said, it didn't sound impossible. It was quite clear on areas that they are objecting to. And I think those areas are not also intractable. They are areas that can probably be maybe broken down, you know, watered down, you know, just to allay the fears of people in circles. Remembering that in an atmosphere of difference like this, you know, one thing that suffers most is trust. You know, once that point is made, that it's not about, you know, discriminating against any section, any ethnic group, or any set of people with illustrious economic culture. It's about, you know, adapting to new realities, new changes, as new development as a result of population explosion, as a result of urbanization, as a result of development, and of course against the background of the need for education. And education has to start from the scratch. You know, people who are otherwise supposed to be educated, you know, from the beginning are being disadvantaged on account of an economic culture, you know, that needs some level of modification. So it's not about hatred or dislike, but about modernization and being compliant with, you know, the trappings of the postmodern age that we're in. So it didn't come to me as very difficult, because I had listened to Senator Abaribe yesterday as well, and of course it came very clear. And listening to Senator Aliero too, he also was very clear, specifically in the area of saying that, okay, free movement should not be impeded. You know, that's the inalienable right of every citizen. We're not then of course the other party can come to say that we're not saying that we're impeding free movement. All we're saying is that among those who move freely on account of being pastoralists, you know, their ranks are being infiltrated by criminals who are endangering the lives of otherwise people who are peace-loving, who are also pursuing, you know, their own economic objectives, you know, through farming, you know, agriculture, and etc. You know, so those details can be ironed out, and at the end of the day, they'll probably be on the same page. You know, and this is very important, you know, because we need to resolve this crisis, considering how it has been problematic over the years. Farmer herder clashes been a major drawback for the progress we are making in the agricultural sector, you know, constituting a major, you know, insecurity question that needs resolution, you know. And of course, we're talking about food production, enhancing production to ramp up the economy. But this has suffered in the past because of the question of insecurity. Right. And key to the question really is the farmer herder clashes, and of course the continued allegation that this is perpetrated by a section. And that section has been rightly or wrongly, but most times wrongly, typified as the Fulanis. You know, and no ethnic group really will want to be typified as bad, because this is an illustrious race. We know what they have done in the history of this country, from even pre-colonial times up to post-colonial times. And of course, there's no ethnic group that does not have one kind of downside or the other. So a continuous, you know, stigmatization, negative stigmatization of any ethnic group is bound to be resisted by elites in that group.
Right.
And of course, when we see policies that are geared towards affecting an economic culture, that a heritage that they cherish, you know, people can become very suspicious.
Right. On the other hand,
suspicious, it can raise anxiety.
Yeah.
But what needs to be done now is an assurance,
right.
you know, on the other side that,
right.
no, this is not about witch hunting or about typifying or demonizing a race, but it's about, you know, fostering peaceful
Right.
economic
Right.
harmony.
On the other hand, of course, Professor, when a certain, I mean, things go beyond just people being demonized or stereotyped, when thousands of people are killed, whole villages are sacked, destroyed, people within their own communities now have to go and live in IDP camps. It's moved beyond stereotyping people. I mean, you know, to something that has become a major security concern in this country, which is why it's moved into the Senate. So it's gone past that stage. Do you agree with those who say that, you know, with climate change eroding further grazing areas in the north, this bill that's being debated in Parliament, if it fails to become law, would mean that this could explode into an even bigger conflict?
Well, I don't think so. First, let me first of all react to the first poser that you raised. And I listened to Senator Aleri when he was talking about, you know, how the Fulanis also got to this stage, you know.
Yeah, but he recognizes that there's a major security problem.
But he was talking about the injustices that they have also faced, you know. Injustices around neglect, you know, around the fact that government hasn't ever been present in their lives, so they are beginning to they started becoming frustrated at the time, and they also think, you know, that they should self-help. You know, I mean, can be very concerning, you know. And of course, I also reckon that it is not peculiar to any particular ethnic group. There are different reasons why different sections can claim that.
Well, there are many deprived communities in Nigeria. In every ethnic.
That's the hallmark of any plural.
Yeah. And we don't justify. We don't try to make excuses for those who go out there and kidnap people or become armed robbers or become jihadists killing innocent people.
Yeah, but the danger, Charles, is to attach it to a group of people, you know, on the ground of ethnicity, to an ethnic group. That's where the problem is, really. I mean, if we look at it from the angle of saying these are criminals, you know, let's pick criminals from among a particular ethnic group, I think they'll be freer to engage, you know. But when we, you know, think that an ethnic group is synonymous, or an ethnic culture is synonymous with crime, then of course they go on the defensive, and they think whatever you are advancing before them is meant, you know, to put them down, you know, within the multi-ethnic society that we are in. So I think it's about strategy, really, you know, coming to the same page, you know, and letting people know that it's not about, you know, demonizing like we have agreed, but it's about identifying what has become a problem, you know, from what we described earlier as a salutary, you know, historical heritage that we think, you know, should be compliant with modernity, as the case could be.
Nevertheless, this is yet another aspect and another threat of insecurity in this country that the government and the security forces have not been able to bring under control.
Yeah, well, there are so many issues that appear intractable, and of course, some of them can be very, very challenging. But it's not to say that we should lose hope. You know, we just keep hitting at it. The economy is still problematic. You know, everything is at a tailspin. You know, and sometimes you are struggling to find any silver lining in the dark cloud. You know, but it's not to say again that if you try harder that you will not eventually find it. You know, the times are tough. You know, when times are very tough like this, you know, it's the onus comes back to the leadership to keep reassuring the citizens. I know so it's not just in the area of insecurity, but every other sector.
Sure. You know. But I know you've made a case, and it's a very reasonable argument about, you know, not stereotyping an entire ethnic, you know, group. I mean. But what about the victims of these attacks? I mean, because the brutality of these attacks and the gruesomeness sometimes, and I'm sure you've seen the videos of the killings, often leaves a terrible psychological mark on the witnesses and the surviving victims. And we saw that report today, for example, by Amnesty International talking about the psychological scars and damage that is inflicted upon victims of Boko Haram, for example, and survivors of things like farmer-herder clashes. I mean, but nobody ever thinks of therapy for these people, and they are left as terribly damaged goods.
It's a much more fundamental question you are raising, and of course it's also a major downside of the criminal justice system, where most of the time they focus only on the criminal. And of course, you know, the victim is often at a disadvantage. You know, there's no process to manage the state of mind of the victim. And sometimes we just think that justice is served when the criminal is sanctioned, you know, apprehended, prosecuted, and sanctioned, you know. And of course, we just think that that satisfies or that should end it. But no, in some crimes, you know, they take victims through therapies, you know, through you know, psychological reorientation, counseling, a salutary management of a process, you know, that is meant, you know, to reintegrate them, you know, at the level of the psychology, you know. So, but that's still a major downside in how we manage, you know, incidents, you know, as the case could be. But again, it's part of the wide, broader conversation on the things that we need to improve in our justice system. But I do agree. That the effect can actually be devastating. Some of them life-changing. Some of them traumatic. You know, terrible and traumatic. You know, there's no adjective that we cannot bring in to describe it. And sometimes we have even seen people, you know, exiting the country on account of this because they hardly cannot recover from it, you know, thinking that until they change environments before they completely recover. And some people have actually gone insane, you know, because of the trauma they went through, you know, from the pangs of criminal acts. You know.
Well, imagine going through that trauma of watching people in your village slaughtered, hacked to pieces, your buildings burnt down, your farm sacked, and then you end up living in an IDP camp in your own land, and nobody cares what kind of impact this has had on you.
The pictures can be very grisly, and sometimes they are unimaginable. And of course, I know people who don't even like beholding those images, you know, because of the havoc it wreaks on their psychology. So I quite agree with you.
So imagine having to live through that.
Yeah, it can be very traumatic, you know. But maybe the other one we should also think about, or maybe what you're trying to insinuate is that, you know, there's a set of people that are responsible for this. That's where we're talking about. I think the security agencies will have to come in. We know who they are. Yes, we know they might be preponderantly, I beg your pardon, from an ethnic group. But again, my argument is that it's not enough, you know, to stereotype.
I understand that. I think you made that point.
That's right. Okay.
One of the arguments that people like Senator Aliero are also making is that this bill, if it becomes law, could make herders more vulnerable to attacks by farmers who would perhaps feel more justified in driving them off their land. Because that's what happened in some states that came up with new anti-grazing laws. I mean, it seemed to degenerate into something more dark and dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. But there were some other legal arguments that he canvassed that, you know, between the federal and the state, it should be the responsibility of the state, that the federal shouldn't be involved. I'm sure that this will get strengthened out at the public hearing, but I think the fact that it's about ranching, you know, to limit, sometimes again, if you look at it, what the bill is trying to do is to prevent the pastoralists from being endangered as well, you know, because if you are located within an area, then the vagaries of traveling and dwelling, and sometimes not even dwelling, but just keep moving, you know, will probably be avoided, you know. So the legal, you know, details will probably be strengthened out at some point.
So education is very important.
Very, very important. Sensitization, you know. And of course, we can't joke with this, you know, because it's actually very, very important, you know, especially in an atmosphere of distrust, where there is suspicion, in an atmosphere of suspicion. And of course, we know that that is deep-seated in our polity on account of our multi-ethnicity, and of course, our recent experiences with respect to how our political developments have been shaped, has also played this up.
Yeah, I knew you were going to come around to that, that democracy bit.
And it has played it up. So I think we need a lot of management, the proper management of our communication, the creation of the right awareness, sensitization, so that we can build a consensus, and perhaps move the nation forward overall.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that discussion about democracy, because I'm going to ask you now that you're sitting in front of me that I hope you will bring your professorial knowledge to bear.
There's nothing professorial, just...
No, but seriously, you bring, because I mean, it's always good to have you as part of what we call a donut, where we have a kind of discussion with different people about Nigeria's progress. Tomorrow, of course, is Democracy Day in
we'll
Nigeria.
Keep trying our bits.
So hopefully by the end of this week, we'll be able to have a further chat on it. But thank you, Prof. It's always good to get the benefit of your analysis. Professor Abiodun Adeniyi is a current affairs analyst and Dean of the School of Postgraduate Studies at Baze University in Abuja. Good to talk with you. Thank you.
Yes.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow. From me and the entire team here in Abuja, and the Prof, of course, bye-bye, and thank you for watching.